In today's video, I'll break down a Nokia Angel type beat. Specifically, I took inspiration from Nokia Angel's latest release in Haze, which contains a lot of witch house influenced production. The album's production consists of heavy sub-basses and harsh lead voices, which remind me a lot of the work of Crystal Castles and to some extent Snow Strippers, just to name a few. With the beat I made for this video, I tried to capture the melancholic vibe of In Haze and use different techniques to achieve that. By the way, in this video I also cover 2 of your requests from a previous tutorial I made. Thanks again for your support. I've said enough, let's get right into the video. First of all, I set the tempo of the beat to 115 BPM to match the tempo used in most of the tracks on In Haze. Choosing this slower BPM gives the whole beat a slower, almost half-time feel, which is exactly what we are aiming for. After that, I started the melody by laying down strings I found in Serum and made sure to choose a key that had a sad melancholic sound to it. As you can see, the pattern is as simple as it gets, but it's really important to set the mood for the rest of the beat. Once I was happy with the chords, I moved on to lay down another string sound. This time to add more high end. Take a listen. You may notice there isn't much movement in the melody. That's intentional, because a slow melody leaves more space for the drums and the rapper to shine. For me, this is really important since a lot of producers tend to overdo the melody and by doing so, take space away from the artist. In the next step, I wanted a typical witch house lead synth to play over our string sections. Despite going through different presets, I couldn't find a single one that matched my expectations. In these cases, it's really useful to know how to create sounds on your own with a synth of your choice. For my example, I decided to use Serum and started with the default settings. For the first oscillator, I set the unison to 9 and turned up the detune to around 0.40. The second oscillator is set to a unison of 12, with detune to about 0.50. Besides that, I used the built-in low-pass filter and tweaked the cutoff frequency to about 15,000 Hz. After that, the only thing I did was apply some effects to make the sound as harsh as we expect from a witch house lead. Take a listen to how it sounds straight out of the synth. I was happy with the results but wanted to accentuate the sound a little more. For this reason I used a sidechain effect inside Shaperbox to give the lead more bounce. This sidechain effect was followed by another instant of drive to boost harshness even more. To freak it out even further, I used phase distortion and pushed up the drive. After that, I thought a bit crush effect would fit nicely, so I applied one to make it sound more digital. The last effects I added were a spreader and a reverb to push the sound into the stereo image, followed by a glue compressor to tighten up the signal. Altogether, the melody section sounds like this. Next, let's focus on the sub-bass, which is one of the key elements in the atmospheric sound of Nokia Angel's album. I decided to use 3 different sub or re-spaces for different parts of the beat. The first one I found in Serum. The pattern I laid down is pretty simple to match the rest of the melody. I kept the processing simple too, just rolling off unnecessary high end with an EQ, adding some color with a ladder filter and finishing it off with a compressored sidechain to the kick, which we'll cover later. The sub-bass in the next part of the beat consists of 2 layers, one more dominant in the low end and the other showing more presence in the lower mids. Played together, I really like how they complement each other. For processing, I simply copied the same sidechain I used for the first bass onto both of the other basses. The reason the sidechain on the sub-basses is so important becomes obvious when I play the kick together with them. As you can see, every time the kick hits, the bass ducks for a moment. This makes the kick punch harder through the mix while still keeping the tone of the bass intact. Before we get to the drums, I want to talk about the intro I made for this beat. Take a listen. As you can hear, besides the melody on the sub-bass, there's also a vocal sample implemented. I found this one on Looperman and thought it would match the beat since it also had a very atmospheric sound. Vocal samples are also a big part of why Nokia Angels in Haze sounds so atmospheric, for example on the track At Night Again. For me, the vocal sample brings so much more life to the track and enhances the melancholic vibe. The only problem that came up after importing the sample into my project was that the pitch didn't match the beat. To fix that, I used Logic's stock plugin pitch shifter and pitched it up until it fit with the rest of the project. That's how I managed to make the vocals fit. Let me know if you know another way to do this. After that, I put a massive reverb on the vocals to increase the atmosphere. Generally speaking, Valhalla Supermassive is my go-to reverb plugin when I want a huge reverb. To glue the effect and the sound together, I used a simple compressor, and that's all I did to process the vocals. You may have noticed in the second part of the intro there's an echo on the vocals. I created that by duplicating the track and adding an echo on the duplicate. Then pulling down the parts where I wanted the echo to come through. Fun fact, if you're wondering what language the vocals are sung in, it's actually Elvish. I didn't even know that language existed before. That's it for the vocals. Let's move on to the drums. I started with a simple hi-hat pattern in 1/8 triplets. I heard the same hi-hat pattern on the first track of In Haze, Stay Cold, and thought it sounded really cool. A little reverb on the hi-hat makes the sound much more realistic and matches the atmospheric tone of the rest of the beat. Following the hi-hat, I used the basic snare to get the beat moving. After 8 bars, I decided to bring in a few other percussion sounds. I started with the famous yeet bell, on which I used delay as well as reverb. Since I thought it sounded too simple, I bounced the bell into audio and reversed the reverb tail to get this transition sound. Take a listen. Next, I used an open hat and applied stereo delay to widen up the stereo image of the drum section. The last drum element I used was a counter snare that also hits in triplets to accentuate both the hi-hat pattern and the kick pattern. So that's basically all I did to create a Nokia Angel witch house type beat. I personally had so much fun making this beat. If you also liked what you heard, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.